All things on earth should be related to man as their center and their crown. Our era needs the wisdom of bygone ages, if the discoveries made by man are to be further humanized. For the future of the world stands in peril unless wiser men are forthcoming. It should be pointed out that poor nations are rich in wisdom and can offer the advantages to the others. It becomes more clear if we consider that the unification of the world and the duty imposed upon us will be a better built world upon truth and justice. So you are only made fully human through human culture, and this only occurs when we unify the world. Gaudium et Spes document, the church and the modern world. And we're going to look at paragraph 12, because this one is overlooked because everybody focuses on, and it's not wrong because it's kind of the easiest thing to go to like the doctrinal issues, the liturgical issues, the worship issues, right? Like praying together with Muslims and all this. Muslims can be saved as Muslims. All the nonsense that we find in Vatican II. But there's this other document called Gaudium et Spes, which has to do with the church in the modern world in terms of geopolitics, believe it or not. And it's as wild, but it's not in a dogmatic context, even though it's full of total socialist nonsense. The dignity of the human person. Notice this Catholic humanism. This is something that John Paul II and a lot of his books tried to promote. I've read a lot of John Paul II stuff. A lot of his homilies and a lot of his encyclicals were very notorious for this idea that man is the center of everything. It's very bizarre. But actually, when we think about Vatican II, it's going to make a lot of sense. So this is a really weird statement here. According to unanimous opinion of believers and unbelievers, all things on earth should be related to man as their center and their crown. What? First of all, we don't do our theology and our geopolitics on popular opinion. Like, this is some kind of weird, because everybody agrees on this. Number one, they don't agree on that. And why do we care in the church and Christianity what the unbelievers are saying we should do? I mean, that's preposterous. But, I mean, even more preposterous is the idea that in Christianity, Christendom, especially Orthodox Christianity, man is the center and the crown of all reality. I mean, that's just insane, weird humanism that is just completely false. In fact, there is a papal document called Quas Primus that was actually written to counteract the idea that society should be organized around the doctrine of man as its center and crown. So it's actually been specifically condemned. It's kind of a man worship. It's a secular idea of social theory. It's not just pluralism. It's like rabid secularism. And it's patently false. Christians and unchristians agree that man is the center and crown of all activities on earth. It sounds like Antichrist, right? It's insane. Now, don't worry though, because it's going to get even crazier as we move through this bizarre document. Let's see, there's a weird statement on conscience. There's a lot of socialism in this document, which is why it's really bizarre and dangerous. And it actually, if you don't know, John the 23rd, who was, believed to be sort of a Rosicrucian Masonic pope, there was concern at that time by the CIA that he's called the Pinko Pope, and so the CIA tried to establish a lot of discussions and alliances with him, but then they were a lot more successful with Paul VI. So Paul VI was far more closely aligned with the CIA. John the 23rd actually wanted to open up the Roman Catholic world and church to the Soviet Union, and he spoke about this very openly, hence why he was called the Pink Pope. But he wrote a famous encyclical called Pacem in Terris, which had to do with opening the church up to the geopolitics of secularism and the United Nations, and it actually calls for the creation of international institutions to redistribute wealth, etc. So it's a very heavily socialist document. And what's fascinating is that Vatican II further aligns itself in the Gaudium et Spes document, which everybody overlooks or ignores or they're not even aware of it, they never read it, is actually extremely socialist United Nations globalist document. Here's another weird, I guess you could call this anti-colonial sort of indigenous propaganda. Listen to this one. This is wild. It says, "Our era needs the wisdom of bygone ages, if the discoveries made by man are to be further humanized. For the future of the world stands in peril unless wiser men are forthcoming. It should be pointed out that poor nations are rich in wisdom and can offer the advantages to the others. It's just that kind of like anti-colonial woke speak all the way back in the 1960s in the Vatican II documents. The next weird statement, let's see what the next weird one is. I think it's this one, Human Community, chapter 2. Now this one is a theological mistake. This one's very subtle, but I want you guys to look for the theological error on, I'm not going to say what it's on, and I want you to see if you can figure it out, paragraph 24. I'm going to read it, and then I want to look at the chat to see who can figure out the mistake here. God, who has fatherly concern for everyone, has willed that all men should constitute one family and treat one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Well, first of all, that's actually not true, because the church is the restored new humanity. This is actually taking what's true about the church and applying it to civilization as a whole, the brotherhood of man, which you could say, yeah, in a sense, all men in Adam are brothers. But that it doesn't follow from that God wants there to be an international one nation brotherhood of men. That's a Masonic goal. It says all men are created in the image of God. That's all good, etc. They're all called to the same goal, God himself. That's correct. Now, listen to this. For this reason, love of God and of neighbor is the first commandment and greatest commandment. Did you hear that? For this reason, love for God and neighbor is the first and greatest commandment. Anyone notice the theological error there? Give the proof. What line in the book? We're literally reading the text on the screen, you idiot. Where's the proof? On the freaking screen. Who notices the theological error in this statement of Gaudium et Spes? Anybody? I'm looking in the chat and I'm waiting. I think the chat's a little bit behind. So when Sheikh Shamoon, I think you got it. Let's see. We're going to keep going to see if anybody else gets it. Does nobody know what the first and greatest commandment is? Come on, guys. You shall have no other gods. So this slip up cleverly inserts the love of man into the first commandment of the love of God. A very odd, bizarre, basic mistake, but it actually makes sense in a document that is trying to replace the primacy of God with a Catholic humanism, which is ultimately just humanism. Hence, the document pushes the brotherhood of man. The document pushes the idea that man is the center and crown of all of society, which is just absolutely bizarre. But it gets even worse as we move on. These are just some of the weird ones. Let's look at paragraph 42, one of the most egregious contradictions in Catholic dogma right here. What does the church offer to society? This is paragraph 42 in the document. The union of the human family is only found in Christ, in the family of God's sons. Okay, that's true. That sounds good. Christ gave his church no proper mission in the political, economic, or social order. Interesting. No political, social mission. Is that the classic teaching of the Roman Catholic Church? Now, wait a minute. Let's come over here to Unum Sanctum, about 900 years earlier. And we're going to read this famous paragraph that I'm always referring to. For according to the blessed Dionysius, it is a law of divinity that the lowest things reach the highest things by intermediaries. Therefore, according to this, the universe, all things are not led back equally or immediately, but the lowest by their intermediary. The acceptance of the power itself by government, all right, so he's talking about spiritual and political power. It belongs to the spiritual power to establish the terrestrial earthly power. The papacy is superior to and establishes the temporal. Thus is accomplished the prophecy of Jeremiah. In other words, they're taking Jeremiah's prophecy about Jesus and now applying it to the papacy. The papacy is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. I have placed you over nations and over kings. So notice what they do. Something that is a prophecy that Jeremiah makes about Jesus, Well, it's actually about the papacy being king of kings. You can't make this up. Therefore, if the terrestrial power, and this is in the midst of controversies with kings, if the king errs, it's the Pope that is the superior. Now, in the Orthodox Church, yes, we definitely agree that the church is superior. But it doesn't follow from that the papacy is therefore a world ruler. And that's the purpose of this document. It goes on to say, because whatever you bound on earth will be bound in heaven. Notice how Matthew 16 is now being used, not just for a spiritual power and authority in the Roman sense of the see and the papacy spiritually. It's now being applied to world power and kingdoms and armies. I'm not joking. Like the papacy gets a standing army a couple centuries after this. Thus, we declare, proclaim, and define absolutely necessary for salvation every human creature be subject to the Roman pontiff, both spiritually and temporally. That's the purpose of this document. Go read it. It's called Unum Sanctum. You must also accept that the Pope is a world emperor to be saved. That is what this document is arguing. And that continues all the way up into the time of Pius IX, the Vatican I, in the syllabus of errors, where it is condemned at that time as well, that if you reject this document, it's condemned, or this doctrine of temporal supremacy. It is a condemned idea. Is everybody following me? This shouldn't be that controversial. Syllabus of errors. This is Pius IX in 1864, so we're basically 900 years ahead of the original Dictatus Papae statement, and then we're, 600, 500 years later after Unum Sanctum in the 1300s. And we're going to look at paragraph 76. The abolition of the temporal power of the Roman See, the Apostolic See, would contribute to liberty and prosperity of the church. We should get rid of the temporal power, the Pope as a world ruler and geopolitical emperor. It's condemned. Unum Sanctum, you got to believe in it to be saved. Temporal power, not just spiritual power, temporal power, all the way up to syllabus of errors. If you don't believe in the temporal power, even in the 1800s, you're condemned. It's a condemned proposition right there by the Vatican. But wait a minute. When I read Gaudium et Spes, the church in the modern world, it says Christ never gave to the church any political, economic, or social mission or order. Roman Catholics think that I'm arguing that there's no power of the papacy spiritually. They don't understand the difference between the spiritual and the temporal. This is the two powers theory of the Middle Ages. Okay, Unum Sanctum is very clear that Rome says, yes, you can talk about two powers, but the Pope has both and is superior in both. And you must believe that to be saved. Clear as day contradiction. Vatican II says Jesus never gave his church any political, economic, or social mission. I can't think of something more clear than that. Moving on, because Gaudium et Spes is a treasure trove of weird humanism, bizarre statements. Let's look at another one of these in paragraph 53. And you're going to notice this trend of humanism that we already saw. By the way, this going through this also shows you the sense and attitude that Vatican II had about secular culture and de-Christianizing the Christian states. That's what this further demonstrates, which further proves a complete change in dogma on Catholic social teaching. Here's another one of these bizarre humanist statements. Man comes to a true full humanity only through culture. Well, actually, that doesn't make any sense, because you have human nature and you're a human person from the womb. You're not a potential person. That's a bizarre language, because usually people that believe that you're not a person until you're a certain age, which is what people who are pro-up argue. That's a pro-up line of argumentation, if you're not familiar. That is, through the cultivation of the goods and values of nature. It is only true and full humanity, which is by means of culture, okay, and then now we're going to compare this to what's said in paragraph 55, because this is about this supposed culture. From day to day, in every group and every nation, there's an increase in the number of men and women who are conscious that they are themselves authors and artisans of the culture of their community. Throughout the whole world, there is a mounting increase in the sense of autonomy as well as responsibility. This is of paramount importance for the spiritual moral maturity of the human race. It becomes more clear if we consider that the unification of the world and the duty imposed upon us will be a better built world upon truth and justice. So you are only made fully human through human culture, and this only occurs when we unify the world. Interesting. Now, what is this all about? Well, in paragraph 55, thus we are witnessing the birth of a new humanism. Exactly. NWO talk. In other words, remember the French Revolution? All the philosophe verbiage? This is French Revolution Masonic philosophe verbiage, if you've read those texts, and I have studied them in grad school. Did you not hear me multiple times say it's a new kind of humanism? What does the text say right there? A new humanism is born. One in which man is defined first of all by responsibility to God? No. Remember what we saw about the rewording of the first and greatest commandment? What was the rewording? Responsibility first of all to other men. You're only fully human, you're only fully a man, your number one responsibility is to the society of man. That is straight up socialism and Marxism right there. That's Marxism, Socialism 101. You achieve your full maturation as a person and as an individual in the collective because you're responsible to the collective. The number one responsibility that you have in this new humanism isn't to God with the rewording of the first commandment. It is to what? To all other men, to humanity. Wow. Man, the autonomous author of his own culture. Wow. Now you think, okay, that's pretty bad. Well, guess what? It gets even worse. Because with all of those French Revolutionary Socialist arguments laid down, again, this is not new in Vatican II. It's actually in Pacem in Terris, John the 23rd encyclical on these things. What's the goal of all this? Did Jesus, now keep this in mind, Jesus didn't send a church with any political, social, or economic mission at all. That's what the text said. None. But now watch this contradiction as we shift to the social United Nations goal that is the real goal of Catholicism in the post-Vatican II era. Watch this. This is going to blow your mind because it gets even worse. Paragraph 82. Remember, the church has no social, economic, political goals, but now we have the goal of the outlawing of all war. Yes, you heard me right. The text that I have, which is not, it doesn't have all of the headings. The actual headings in the text that I have, I'll show it to you. It actually says, it is time to outlaw all warfare. What? In the meantime, efforts have already been made and are still underway to eliminate the danger of war. On the contrary, support should be given to the goodwill of every man to do away with war. So, I thought we had no duty in the Catholic Church to political, social, and economic realms. Jesus didn't establish that. Wait a minute. But now the Vatican, as a geopolitical global institution, is ready to put aside all nationalistic differences. Oh, wait a minute. What? Notice that. Are you noticing how socialist and Marxist this document actually is? Look at the last section of 82. Watch this. There needs to be new education, particularly with the young, so that they don't fall into old problems. What are these old problems? Let's not let a false hope deceive us. Unless enmities and hatred are put away, honest agreements concerning world peace. Did Jesus say he came to bring world peace? I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. The new Vatican II Jesus, though, is a geopolitical symbol of socialist world peace and internationalist institutions. And it's explicitly going to say that here in a second. Okay, but I want you to see the actual Marxist verbiage right here. Men should take heed not to entrust themselves only to the efforts of some, while not caring about their own attitudes. Government officials who must at one and the same time guarantee the good of their own people and promote the universal good are generally dependent on public opinion and feeling. It does them no good to work for peace as long as feelings of hostility, contempt, and distrust, and racial hatred continue to divide men into camps. Consequently, there is above all a pressing need for renewed education. Section 2, setting up an international community. Look at that. International socialist goals, international socialism. Literally, you could read any of the Fabian socialist texts, any of the Marxist texts about their internationalist goals and agendas and how they speak, and it's exactly identical to this. In order to build up peace, and above all, the causes of discord amongst men, especially injustice, which foment wars, they must be rooted out. Now remember, we were just told that the church doesn't have any political and social mission, that Jesus gave it. But apparently the Vatican and the CIA and the Fabian socialists are giving it a mission. Not a few of these causes come from excessive economic inequalities. Why are there wars? Because rich nations have more money than the poor nations. It's exactly what socialists always say. Other causes of discord relates to contempt, envy, distrust, pride, egotism, etc. Thus, what's the solution? Jesus and Christianity? No. The solution is organizing together in international bodies to create international organizations for global peace and the ending of war. That's what we just read earlier. That's the UN. All the stuff that Francis and all of his buddies promoted. That's UNESCO. That's the World Economic Forum. Remember, Klaus's mentor is the same mentor as Francis. Paulo Freire, the socialist, and then Archbishop Camara. Those are the mentors. Francis's mentor, Klaus's mentor. Camara, the liberation theologian, socialist. What is this? Liberation theology, socialism. And then guess what? There's more. We're not even done. Why has this problem persisted? Well, it turns out it's partly the fault of Christianity. You can't make this up. Already there exists international organizations helping the human race. Oh, thank you. Thank you, UN. They are laying the foundations for an international community, the New World Order. And Christians are helping to create this by working with non-Christians. The present solidarity of mankind calls for a revival of international cooperation in economics. International monopoly capital socialism. That's what this is. Now that all people have become autonomous, this unification is becoming difficult. The development of a nation depends on financial aid. Interesting. But remember, Jesus didn't give the church a political, social, and economic mission. This entire document is about the political, social, and economic mission of the United Nations supporting Vatican. Do you not see how stupid this is and how crazy this is? I'm trying to find the part where it says change of heart. It's supposed to be paragraph 82 at some point. Here it is. Indeed, We all need a change of heart in regarding the world and the better unification and unison of the human race. So Christianity got it wrong for all these years. It needs a change of heart. What do you have obligations to? Turns out your obligations are to the international community. Again, everything this document has been saying over and over and over. In view of the increasingly close ties and mutual dependence today between all the inhabitants and peoples of the earth, the apt pursuit of efficacious attainment of the universal common good requires the community of nations organize itself into a manner suited to its present responsibilities, especially towards many parts of the world suffering from lack. If you're a wealthy nation, you are not helping and supporting humanity. You owe all of your money to the poor nations because of, why? Jesus and socialism. I mean, if you don't see a problem with this, I thought you guys were against the New World Order. This is the New World Order right here, okay? It is the United Nations and the Vatican has many, many times over said they like the United Nations. In fact, Benedict the 15th was a supporter of the League of Nations. So it's not like this is some new post-Vatican II thing. Pope Benedict the 15th, if you have the Oxford History of the Popes, read his entry. It talks about him being a huge supporter of the League of Nations, which was a Fabian socialist agenda on record, as we've covered. This is also a Fabian socialist agenda. If you can't recognize it, I don't know what to tell you. Last paragraph of 84 is really wild. Watch this. Already existing international and regional organizations are certainly well deserving of the human race. In other words, the UN. What do you think he's talking about? The UN, the Fabian socialist organizations, that's the only ones that exist. That's what they're talking about. UNESCO. These are the first efforts at laying the foundation of the international community of all men working together to solve the problems of the human race, to progress everywhere, and to get rid of war. Again, did Jesus say he came to bring world peace or a sword? In all of these activities, the Roman Catholic Church takes joy in the spirit of brotherhood. Again, Masonic gibberish speak. To relieve human misery. I'm pretty sure Jesus said it is not the mission of the church to secure the temporal gains and the temporal health of world peace and of the nations. He said he came to bring a sword and to preach the gospel of repentance. This is the gospel of Fabian socialism and fixing the world. And if you've never read the Grand Inquisitor chapter, which I had a whole college class on, this proves Dostoevsky was a prophet. Dostoevsky said the papacy will ditch Jesus and will offer a world socialism answer to solving man's temporal problems. Here it is right here. Dostoevsky vindicated right there. The last paragraph of 87. In keeping with man's inalienable rights to marry and to generate children, a decision concerning the number of children they will have depends on the right and the judgments of the parents. All right. Now there's more, but those are the high points of Gaudium et Spes, which is a document nobody ever covers. So hopefully you see very clear that like the Vatican is teaching socialism, internationalism, globalization. None of this has anything to do with what they taught even decades earlier with the syllabus of errors, saying that the church cannot be separated from the state. Even the geopolitical power of the Roman See, you can't get rid of that. It's condemned if you try to. Night and day opposite. And if you can't see that, and by the way, I don't know if you know, there's like tons of condemnations of socialism in this 10 books, 16 papal documents. Do you know how many times they condemn socialism, right of private judgment, freedom of conscience, freedom of worship? Like every one of these papal documents is condemning, literally word for word, all the stuff that you just saw in Vatican II's Gaudium et Spes. If that's not clear enough, I don't know what else could be made clear to you guys. I mean, at that point, it's bad faith, right? It's like There's nothing that's going to convince you because you've joined a cult where literally the Pope can determine reality and truth at any moment.